That was a dominating victory and not a good look for the Ole Miss Rebels. But the benefit is nobody really expected to win that game anyway. We'll talk all about it. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It was a horrible matchup. Ole Miss was scuffling, and Ole Miss got blown out by 30 points at Auburn. I expected Ole Miss to lose this game. If you saw my prediction, I had Ole Miss predicted to lose by like 12 points. I did not see them losing by 30, and a lot of that has to do with the slow start that has continually plagued this team over the last couple of games. They just can't seem to start quickly or out on the front foot, to steal from a soccer term. It is a situation to where they always start out behind the eight ball, down by a significant amount of points, and I do not know why it's happening. I don't know if it's lack of aggression. I don't know if the other team just wants it more. I don't know if the game plan at the beginning is just a little bit off, and inside the game, Chris Beard has to make changes. I do not know. But all I know is in the last two games, Ole Miss was down in the first half to Vanderbilt by 19 points, and they were down in the first half to Auburn by 22 points. That is a problem. And when you have a team like Ole Miss that has as much trouble rebounding the basketball, that is prone to scoring droughts during the game, it's not a situation that you can win. It's not something that you can come back from. The secret to Ole Miss basketball over the course of this season has not changed. It is playing a clean game, very little turnovers. Try to fight as much as you can in the rebounding battle and try and make the game ugly. When the other team can get out and play clean, it is not a matchup that Ole Miss can win. Matthew Morrell is injured. He actually played pretty well tonight, so he's not so injured that you can count him out. He played all right tonight. Dre Davis was a no-show tonight. For whatever reason, he got into a little bit of foul trouble. Jamin Brakefield, noticed him a couple of times. Juju Murray did not shoot the ball particularly well. Sean Padula and Malik Dia were probably the best players on the team tonight. But the fact of the matter is, this was never a good matchup for Ole Miss. This is a game that I literally said 2 days ago on the podcast, there shouldn't be an Ole Miss fan out there that expects to win this game. Period. This is a horrible matchup. And it all starts with the big men that they have on the inside and how they can pitch it out to really good shooters on the outside. When those shooters are making shots, there's nothing that Ole Miss can do to overcome what's happening. When Ole Miss is not forcing turnovers, Auburn actually won the turnover battle tonight. We'll talk about that after the first commercial break. When you're not turning the other team over, when you are turning the ball over, when you have problems rebounding, more than a double digits deficit. Auburn beat Ole Miss shooting free throws, shooting three-point shots, shooting two-point shots, rebounding, turnovers. They won every single category. This was as one-sided of a game as Chris Beard has had in the Chris Beard era. I'm not mad at Chris Beard. I'm not mad at Ole Miss. I'm not talking about about that, but that is just a factual thing. This was the most one-sided game that I can remember in the Chris Beard era. And Auburn, they wanted this game. They were up for it. They were ready to go. We're going to go over the stats, and your eyes are just going to pop out with how good they shot the ball, how good they took care of the ball, how they rebounded the ball. You can actually see on the stat sheet how dominant of a performance this was for the Auburn Tigers. And they are a really good team. When people talk about the SEC being a dominant conference, they are the best team in the most dominant conference they are arguing in history. Okay? They are a good team. And we talked about going into this game. If Ole Miss has another slow start like they did against Vanderbilt, you're not going to be able to overcome that against Auburn. And Ole Miss had an extreme slow start. They were down about 22 points in the first half. Ole Miss, to their credit, was able to cut it down to 6. There was about a 10-minute period of that game to where you could actually see, okay, this is, if Ole Miss can string this play together, they can beat people. You can see how they beat Kentucky. You can see how they beat Alabama. And then there's just the other spurts the other way to where you can see how they lost to Missouri. You can see how they got blown out by Mississippi State. You can see how Vanderbilt was such a tough matchup for them during the game, even though we didn't see it coming. It sets up one of the most important games of the Chris Beard tenure, and it's against a team that is 5-10 in the SEC, fighting for their tournament lives, but a team that can be a pretty good basketball team in Oklahoma. Ole Miss absolutely must win that game. And listen, I'm taking care of things right now completely with kid gloves. Ole Miss loses to Oklahoma, the kid gloves come off. Because that's the game you absolutely must have. No more slow starts, no more excuses. You played pretty well in spurts tonight. You shot the ball pretty well tonight. But against Oklahoma, you have to figure out a way to win that game. And then you have the free shot against Tennessee. If you can somehow get both of those games, you can go into the SEC tournament and March Madness feeling better about yourself. If you don't take those games, you are a prime candidate for one and done in the NCAA tournament at about a 10 seed. Barely making it in the tournament. This Oklahoma game is the biggest game of the Chris Beard tenure. It's not even close. It doesn't matter. Number one, Auburn's coming into your arena. It doesn't matter you beating Kentucky. None of that stuff matters. This Oklahoma game is the biggest game of the Chris Beard tenure, and you absolutely can't afford to lose it. If you lose by 1, if you lose by 30, it's the same thing. There's no such thing as anywhere close to a moral victory. You have to win this game. If you want pressure, we just put all the pressure on you. Well, actually, you put all the pressure on yourself. But Ole Miss absolutely must beat Oklahoma. Anyway, when we come back, we are going to talk about the box score and do that real quick for about 5 minutes, and then we are going to move to your comments. Remember, if you're commenting, please put where you're commenting from so I can know how to shout that out and all of that as well. But it should be pretty interesting, so stick around for that. The NFL, not the NFL playoffs, just a second. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're back, and let's do a little box score cleaning in this game. It was a blowout, everybody. It just simply was. But it's just better off if you just put it in the trash and get ready for Saturday at this point. Because what happened, and being mad about it, losing to the #1 team in the country on the road is not going to do any good. Ole Miss did get blown out in that game, and the final score was 106-76. I realize everybody poked fun at Mississippi State for getting beat by Alabama, and I just looked on the schedule and saw that Auburn on the road was coming up, and I was like, hey, you guys might want to settle down about what's going on. If you look at field goal shooting, 2-point shots, Ole Miss 47.1%. They were aggressive in and around the basket. It paid off for them. They did exactly what they needed to do. They were only 5 of 14 on 3-point shots. They had 10 turnovers. 5 of them were in the first 5 minutes of the game. They did not start well at all. They only had 20 rebounds for the entire game, but part of that has to do with the fact that Auburn just wasn't missing tonight. Ole Miss had 25 fouls over the course of the evening. Auburn shot 59.6% on all shots, 11 of 21. That's over 50% from three-point range. Only 8 turnovers, had 33 rebounds, and 22 fouls for the game. It's absolutely nuts about what happened in this game. It's one of those situations that I'm like, man, they just were on so early, and they just took advantage of every situation of the game going on a run. I think Auburn made its first 5 shots of the game, and they were up like 19-10, even though Ole Miss shot pretty well at the beginning of the game. But Ole Miss had 11 points from Malik Dia, had 14 from Sean Padula, 12 from Matthew Morrell, 12 from Dre Davis, most of those at the very end of the game, the second half. He had 2 points at halftime. John Bowl had 2 points. Jamin Brakefield had 13 points. Is a situation shooting at the free throw line. Ole Miss was 23 of 31. At one point, they were like 20 of 23. So they didn't shoot free throws very well at the end of the game. Auburn from the free throw line was 27 of 33 as a team. Their leading scorer was Janai Broome, as you would expect, and Chad Baker-Mazar had 22 points in the game. Denver Jones, 13. Miles Kelly, 13. Chaney Johnson, 13. Auburn's just a really good basketball team. And you know what? I'm going to be honest about something. We always like to poke fun at Auburn for the antics on the field. They were pretty reserved tonight. They didn't even have to be pretty reserved, but they were pretty reserved tonight. I don't have anything to really hold against Auburn in the game. I think Broome acted fine. Baker-Mazar acted pretty fine. The things that make people angry and stuff like that, they didn't do it this time. I think the official called the game pretty tight for the banging and the physicality of what these teams were doing to prevent it from getting a little bit out of control. That's the reason you had a lot of free throws. Ole Miss getting to the line, that's a good sign for the Oklahoma game. The Oklahoma game is absolutely massive for Ole Miss basketball. Not to get to the tournament. Like I said, Ole Miss is in the tournament. They're going to get there. But the difference between a 7 seed and a 10 or 11 seed is this Oklahoma game. That sounds completely weird, but Ole Miss has a game against the number 2 seed at predicted Tennessee coming up next week. They close out against a predicted 1 seed in the Florida Gators next week. And then you have Oklahoma on Saturday. That Oklahoma game is absolutely massive, and Ole Miss has to have it. Whether it's by 1 point, 30 point, they have to win that game. And if they can do that, you're going to start having a little bit better feeling. And if Ole Miss can get through Oklahoma, they have a chance to make that Tennessee game at least interesting. Because if Tennessee isn't shooting the lights out from 3 points, you have a shot against the Tennessee Vols. That's just the way they play. They'll D you up, and they're like going to the dentist. But if they're not hitting outside shots, the offense might not necessarily be there, and Ole Miss will have a real chance in that game. So when we come back, we're going to get to your comments. Remember, in your comments, if you're going to do it, please put where you're commenting from, and we will see exactly how that goes. Ole Miss a 30-point loss in the jungle to number 1 Auburn. It's a game that probably wasn't as close as the scoreline, if we're going to be real. But we're throwing that game away and getting ready for the Oklahoma Sooners because this Auburn game cannot beat Ole Miss twice. Anyway, we'll be right back with your comments. All right, so let's get to your comments that's going on. If you're going to comment going in the video for the next 15 minutes or so, please put where you're commenting from so I can shout out where that is. We start out with Caramillum because he comments pretty much first every single week. He said, what seed do you think Ole Miss will get in March Madness, Stephen? I saw one today on Lenardi's bracket where Ole Miss was predicted as a 6th seed, and losing by this number of points to Auburn is not going to drop them down. This is the same. Everybody gets beat by Auburn pretty much except for Florida in the jungle. And Auburn taking that on Ole Miss, they're not going to take that out on Ole Miss either. So right now, Ole Miss is predicted as a 6 seed. I think that 6-7 line is where Ole Miss will finish up if they can beat Oklahoma. If they get through Oklahoma, that is where they're going to end up. If they lose to Oklahoma, you have a chance at a 6-game losing streak going into the SEC tournament, which means you could drop down to that 9-10 seed somewhere in there. So somewhere in between 7 and 10, that is the important thing of what's going on. Tyler Leslie from Moorville. This team has to win Saturday in the way they and they are way, way better than they have been playing. Seems like since the state game, we have gotten 8 wins. There hasn't been a lot of fight in a big game for Ole Miss. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they went on the road twice, and winning on the road in this conference is absolutely brutal. It just is. If you're playing a good team on the road, you're going to have trouble. It's just the way it is. You need to hold serve at home. Ole Miss dropping that game against State was massive. That Texas A&M game was absolutely huge. And like I said, I'm not going to hold the Auburn game against them. I'm just not. But you need to figure out a way to get that Oklahoma game. It is the biggest game in the tenure of Chris Beard, that Oklahoma game. And if Ole Miss does that, they can get the fight back, get a little bit of that mojo back, getting ready for the Tennessee game. You have a free shot for a chance to really solidify a 6-line or a 7-line in the tournament. Like I said, they're going to be there, or if they lose to Oklahoma, they're going to be back 9, 10, that area. Ole Miss is in the tournament either way, but it is what it is. Tyler Leslie says, I hope this team hasn't given up. Love my Rebels, never give up. All I can say, they haven't given up. The SEC is just really good, and it's hard to win on the road. And Ole Miss has run into desperate teams, and they didn't match the intensity of those desperate teams. And then Auburn's just better than everybody. They're the best team in the best conference in the history of college basketball. That is what Auburn is at the moment. Auburn's at the point where unless they overlook somebody and pull a Yale or something like that in the NCAA tournament, they got Final Four national title written all over them. This is a really good basketball team for the Auburn Tigers. Losing to Auburn by 1 point or by 30 doesn't matter. That win was going to be hard to get either way. The next game is the important game. They need to figure out a way to start faster against Oklahoma. That's the concerning part for me, is the slow starts that has plagued this team throughout SEC play. When you played Arkansas and Alabama and all those teams, you were able to overcome that slow start for some reason or another. But against Auburn, against Mississippi State, against Vanderbilt, the slow starts have been a little bit more pronounced. I guess Mississippi State wasn't a slow start. That was just a terrible second half. So we'll see. Ole Miss Patriot says Will Wade for some reason. Auburn spent a lot of money on that roster. Saints fans 04. Yeah, and it shows. They were worth every penny. They are absolutely beautiful to watch. And like I said earlier, I've been hard on Auburn in the past. Auburn, the team was much more palatable tonight. I think they behaved themselves, even though they played loose and they did all of that. Auburn, they did about right. Jake Crane, from Crane and Company. Ole Miss will be fine. Auburn is a buzzsaw, man. Yeah, it's the best team in the best conference in the history of college basketball is what Ole Miss is. I mean, what Auburn is. And losing that game and losing the game at Auburn, yeah, it's not a situation that I'm very happy. I'm glad you're watching, Jake. Appreciate it, buddy. Tyler Leslie, Ole Miss has to have someone on the court take control. It's like they don't cut and they don't look for players open. Murrell a few times making cuts and nobody gets him the ball. I think